Episode 1, Stepping into Traffic.
Miss Moore, we're very sorry, but we can't save him without money.
No, please wait. Doctor, please. But the doctor had already cut off the call from the other end of the line. Haley Moore's red, cherry-like lips were trembling in fear, and she stopped, her body frozen, in the middle of the road. Her mind went blank as tears fell like rain down her face. The final weak light of hope she had been clinging to, now extinguished. Life went out of her beautiful diamond-like eyes. The universe, as always, was being too cruel. Haley's sweet little 11-year-old brother, Owen, was dying. He needed a bone marrow transplant. But Haley had failed to find enough money for the treatment. She had already sold everything they had, and the only thing left was her. She was just an ordinary young woman, but her beauty was beyond compare. She had been scouted by numerous talent agencies, all offering her lavish deals, but she had declined them all. She had been mocked for wasting her beauty. People said that she was like a lost diamond, wasting her life among dirt and rubble. People called her crazy for turning down the incredible opportunities she had been offered. But they didn't know how much she hated the entertainment industry. It was nothing but a living nightmare that had ruined her entire family. Her hate had never subsided, and she had always sworn that she would sell herself before she would willingly fall into the same hellhole that had been responsible for her family's death. A car approached her, its horn blasting, but her mind refused to work. All she could think about was that she needed someone to help her save her brother. She would throw herself at God's mercy if it meant Owen, her only remaining family, could be saved. An expensive car stopped less than 3 feet away from her. The car's door opened, but Haley was still staring at her phone.
Hey, what are you thinking? Do you need money that much that you'd get yourself hit by traffic just to sue a driver? Is that it, huh?
The gruff voice reached her consciousness, and she blankly turned her face to see a tall man who looked like a bodyguard in front of her. He was angry, but his eyes widened slightly when he saw her face. He was shocked to see her crying so hard. She looked like the world had just ended. She had dark circles under her eyes, but her beauty was impossible to deny. She was almost too beautiful to be real. Yes, I need money. Her voice was hoarse, but her half-conscious mind still managed to get the words out. Deep within her, she knew that she had no reason to live without her brother.
Are you single?
He brazenly asked. Chills went down her spine, and his words brought her fully back to reality. As she processed the possible implications of what he had said, her tears started anew. She clenched her fists tightly. But what's my dignity worth if I lose my only reason to live? What kind of life would I have without Owen? She bit her lip and then met the tall man's serious eyes bravely, like a warrior. Yes. Episode 2, The Offer. When the man heard Haley's answer, he pulled out his phone, turned his back to her, and made a call. When he was done, he turned to face her again.
I have a way through which you can earn all the money you'll need. But it's unconventional, and you will have to confirm you're willing to do whatever is needed before anything proceeds further. The deal will require you to get married.
He headed back to the car and opened the passenger door, but Haley didn't move.
What? You're not interested?
No, I am, but I'm running out of time. My brother is dying. He needs surgery right away. If I delay any more, he might not make it. The light of hope flickered inside her, but she was desperate to save Owen, and she would fight, no matter how faint the light was.
You're asking for what you want up front? How do I know you won't just take it and run?
The man glared at her. He was very intimidating looking, but she wasn't afraid of anything anymore, except losing Owen. I'm a woman of my word, she said, her eyes coming alive. The man could sense the warrior within her. At first, he had thought she was just a beautiful woman, but now he had the sense that she had survived a lot. Despite looking weak, he could see a strength in her. This was the kind of woman he had been searching for.
Fine, as you wish.
His hard face softened in agreement. He quickly reached inside the car and pulled out a white folder.
Here, this is the contract. If you're willing to abide by it, then sign it, and half the money will be transferred right now,
the man said as he passed the papers to Haley for her to look over. She scanned them quickly and was surprised that the line indicating the amount she would be paid was empty.
As you can see, the amount has been left blank. It's up to you to decide how much you want to ask for,
he said, his tone professional and serious. She could hardly believe it, but she had no time to waste. She was ready for whatever lay ahead. She knew how absurd what she was doing was. She knew this offer was too good to be true, yet she didn't hesitate. She didn't stop to read the conditions of the agreement. I'll sign.
Huh? But you haven't even read.
It's fine, she said, cutting him off. I'll read it later. I need to save my brother first. Pen, please. The tall man frowned in disbelief. He didn't see any hesitation on her sad face. Her eyes were filled with determination, and she looked like she was ready to fight, even if she had to be dragged through hell again.
I'm warning you. This isn't a game, the man said hesitantly before passing her the pen.
But she quickly snatched it from his hand. She placed the papers on the hood of the car, which was still stopped in the middle of the road. Right there, in broad daylight, as other traffic drove past them, she signed the contract, her heart and soul burning like they were on fire. As she passed the folder back to the man, a mysterious smile stretched across her face. Her emotions were in turmoil. Pain and relief merged, making her chest ache. She felt the world pushing down on her and knew her life had been irrevocably changed. Somehow, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Episode 3. A Wedding for One. 5 days later, Haley was traveling in a luxurious car, heading towards God knows where. Her brother was finally out of the woods. He had been recovering in the hospital when she had left him. She had broken down in tears when the doctors had assured her that he was now stable and safe. She had felt like a huge, painful thorn had been removed from her chest, and she could now breathe again. The day she had signed the contract, she had been stunned by how fast things had moved. Her brother had been immediately transferred to the state's top hospital, and he had been treated like royalty. His room looked more like a presidential suite at a luxury hotel than a hospital room. Haley had asked them to save his life, but she had not expected this level of care and attention. She had not been excluded from the special treatment either. But she had shown little interest in the extravagance that had been showered upon her. She had passed caring about anything else but her brother's health and safety. After her brother's successful surgery, Haley had been brought to an empty church for her wedding. The church had been decorated with white flowers, transforming it into a magical spectacle. Every corner had been adorned with lavish and expensive materials. Her dress had been nothing like a traditional wedding gown, but an evening gown, light as a feather and studded with real gems. Her long, straight black hair cascaded gracefully down her back like a silk waterfall. Everything she had worn, everything she had seen, had felt unreal. She had looked like a princess in a fairy tale, breathtakingly beautiful and pure. But the magical church had been empty, and she had been alone. The wedding contract had already been signed by a nameless someone. There had been no printed name written before the signature. And yet, she had been strangely calm throughout the whole process. Guards had been stationed outside, so no one could see her. She had stared at her soon-to-be husband's signature for a long time before opening the white folder that she had brought with her. It contained the contract she had signed in the middle of the road without even having read it. There had been no groom or priest in the church, so she had read through the contract out loud, from start to finish. The contents had not been funny, but reading through the papers had almost made her laugh. It had felt like some kind of weird joke to her, almost like some sort of top-secret government report. The terms of the contract stated that she would be heading to her husband's mansion 5 days after signing it. She would marry and bear a child, but she would have to give up all parental rights as soon as it was born. Nothing was written about what would happen beyond that. Basically, her only mission was to give her husband a child. However, There were also some specific rules written into the contract, and they were even more strange than what she had already read, especially the last one. Rule number 4, you are not allowed to see your husband's face. She had been rendered speechless by this, having no idea how to react. But eventually, she found the most important note written on the last page. It stated that if she broke any of the rules, the contract would be automatically terminated, and she would suffer severe consequences. Her mind had been filled with even more questions than before, along with an increased sense of uneasiness and bitterness. She felt that she was no longer the woman she had been just a few months before. She knew that she had let herself get into this situation feeling like it was her only choice. But now, she was completely preoccupied with what was waiting for her. But still, after a few long minutes of reflection, she had signed the marriage certificate. She understood that it had been foolish to even think about backing out. Looking at her signature on the agreement, she had been forced to acknowledge that she had married a man she had yet to meet, and that she may never actually see his face. Episode 4, Green and Gray.
We're here, miss,
Haley's driver said as someone opened the car door for her. She climbed out looking like a princess, dressed all in white. She looked around and was amazed by how beautiful the place was. A gray mansion stood in a large garden, but as she took in the fresh green landscape, something seemed off to her. She looked around again and frowned when she realized what was wrong. There were only 2 colors on the entire property, green and gray. There weren't even any flowering plants to be seen. Haley was mystified, but before she could wonder about it for too long, she saw the bodyguard, who she now knew was called Tyler Clark, approaching her, accompanied by a dignified-looking old man in his 70s. She focused her attention on the 2 of them.
Miss, please allow me to introduce the butler. This is Mr. Fred Green. You can ask him for whatever you need.
A butler? Haley wasn't sure how to react, so she reached out to shake his hand as a sign of respect to the older gentleman. But as she did so, the 2 men's eyes both widened in surprise.
No, please don't do that, miss. The precious wife of our employer shouldn't greet me, a mere butler, that way.
The old man looked apologetic, and Haley didn't know whether she should laugh or cry.
By the way, miss, your husband will be here soon, Tyler told her, before instructing Fred to take her on a tour of the house in the meantime.
She still looked calm, but a great wave of nerves had washed over her when she had heard her husband was coming. She was utterly distracted from then on, just thinking about her husband, her mind wandering the entire time Fred was showing her around. Why doesn't he want me to see his face? Why won't they tell me anything about him? I don't even know his name. She had been so busy turning these questions over in her head that it took her a moment to realize Fred had led her all the way around and back to the large, luxurious, yet dull-looking living room where they had started the tour.
Okay, miss, that's the whole house. I'm going to get back to work.
Wait, she interrupted him. Where are you going? You're going to leave me here alone? He chuckled kindly.
Please don't worry, young miss. In this house, there is always someone to help with whatever you need, just a few steps away. You can always call us if you need something. Besides, your husband is almost here, so I need to leave now.
Fred gave her a warm smile before heading off to get back to his work. She was left alone in the wide, silent, and dull living room. She looked around at the bleak space. Not a single photo was hanging on the spacious walls, nor were there flowers on top of the empty tables. She felt nothing but emptiness in this luxurious gray house. The sad, empty feeling was so strong that she wrapped her arms around herself in an attempt at comfort and stared at the silver chandelier hanging above her head.
Are you cold?
A man's deep voice suddenly echoed through the room, freezing her to the spot. She broke out in goosebumps at the sound. She could hear footsteps approaching her, so she forced herself to turn around and face him. "Nope, I'm just..." She couldn't continue speaking. She was tongue-tied upon seeing the man in front of her. Masked? She tried to comprehend. Her eyes almost bulged out of her head in shock. A tall man in a black tailored suit that perfectly accentuated his faultless body was standing in front of her, wearing a black mask that covered the upper half of his face. Her mouth hung open slightly as she stared at him, whose whole face she couldn't even see, still looked so handsome. Even though she could only see his lips and jawline, she was charmed just by his seemingly hidden, ethereal beauty. He looked like a gorgeous and mysteriously masked prince at a masquerade ball intended only for demigods. Who are you? She forced herself to ask. Your husband, the man replied. The two-word reply in that same deep, sexy voice was enough to cause chaos inside her body. Her emotions had gone wild, and she didn't know what she was feeling. Episode 5, Reduced to Stuttering. A long silence filled the large room as two people, one angel-like and one devil-like, stood motionless, staring at each other. The masked man stood with his hand in his pocket, casually observing the vision of beauty in front of him. On the other hand, Haley felt like she was a little white mouse waiting for her fated death at the hand of the big, dark beast in front of her. She felt like he was looking through to her soul, as if the gods had bestowed upon him the power to uncover her deepest secrets. Scared? The man's single word was akin to a firework, startling her and making her heart beat wildly as she took in his magical beauty. Huh? No. Well, yes, I am. Her knees were weak. His presence sucked all the energy from her. He was scary, and she didn't dare lie to him. His mysteriously dark and icy demeanor almost made it feel like he was a monster disguised as a beautiful man. But right after she said those words, her eyes widened when the man raised his hand to the nape of his neck. He sighed as if he had expected that response from her. Regretting your decision now? No. Want to go back home? No. She didn't hesitate to answer the man's questions. She felt as if he was testing her, and the wrong answer might prove fatal. So, you're scared, but you still want to stay? Yes, she said, keeping her voice steady and confident. The man put his hand back in his pocket. Her last answer was enough to convince him that she wasn't so bad after all. Her eyes burned with determination and a wild, fighting spirit, in stark contrast to how she looked. He could tell with one glance that she wasn't a weakling, that there was something unfathomable within her fragile-looking body. Good. He seemed somewhat satisfied, and he started removing his suit jacket. On the other hand, she quietly breathed in deeply, then looked straight at his masked eyes. What's your name? Brad. Brad what? Just call me Brad. The man's words were firm, indicating that he wouldn't say any more than what he already had. His voice was filled with authority, like some heartless ruler from an ancient world. His words seemed so absolute that she wondered what this monster would do to her, if she ever went against him. She wondered why the hell he was hiding his face and identity this much, to the point of wearing a mask inside his own home. But she knew this wasn't the right time to ask for the reasons. The contract states that I'm not allowed to see your face. But what if I accidentally see you? I mean, just in case. Yes, accidentally. An accident? That won't happen. She was speechless. How can he be so sure? Does he see himself as some kind of god? But how about at night? Are you going to sleep wearing your mask? She felt like her questions sounded somewhat stupid and probably amusing to him, but the man didn't reply. Instead, he quietly slipped his hand into his pocket and took something from it. He held his hand out to her. Haley stared at the red cloth in his hand, confused. You'll wear this every time we're in bed. Her mouth hung open when she realized what it was. It was a red blindfold. Wait, what? Seriously? I'm going to sleep blindfolded from now on? Are you kidding me? This is insane. She couldn't believe what he had said. She didn't know how to react. She was completely out of words. She might have already kicked him in the balls for saying such absurd things. But he was him. She knew at first glance that he was nothing compared to all the men she had met before. She could sense that he was the definition of the word danger. and his words were nothing less than absolute orders. Episode 6. Roses. Roses everywhere.
Hey, Brad, what the hell are all these?
A loud voice broke the silence in the house. Haley glanced at the entrance where the voice was coming from. When she saw who was there, she did a double take. Another tall, handsome young man stood at the entrance with a bouquet of red roses in his hands. There were so many roses that he was having trouble holding them, and some had fallen to the floor. His irritated face softened as soon as he saw Haley. His eyes sparkled with joy, and he flashed a sweet smile. His tousled brown hair and handsome face gave him the appearance of a teen idol in a boy band.
Hi, ma'am, he exclaimed with excitement as he approached, roses dropping onto the floor as he walked.
Haley hadn't even responded when another loud voice called out,
Hey, what the hell are all these?
Another man appeared in the entrance with an identical bouquet in his hands. The other two men ignored the newcomer, who halted and stopped talking when he saw her.
Anyway, I'm Alan. I'm your husband's friend,
the young man who looked like a teen idol said, with the same sweet smile. Nice to meet you. I'm Haley. Haley greeted him politely with a smile that made him blush. He was surprised by how beautiful she was in person. Beautiful wasn't a strong enough word for her.
These?
Alan noticed that Haley was looking at the roses he was holding, and he turned to the quiet masked man beside him.
Why are there so many?
Alan asked him softly.
You said she would like them,
Brad replied blankly as he loosened his tie. Then he quietly walked to the stairs and left. Alan and Haley watched silently until he had disappeared from their sight. Not this many, though, Alan thought. He felt like a troubled father trying to understand his son's behavior. He dropped the bouquet to the floor, which surprised Haley. She knew that the roses were very expensive.
What should we do with all these? He bought too many. There's still a truck full of red roses outside.
Alan laughed and Haley closed her eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. Imagining Brad, her scary masked husband, buying her a truckload of roses eased her fear. She was glad that he was at least trying to give her something he thought she would like. The gesture also piqued her curiosity, and she wanted to know more about her mysterious husband. Haley showered and retired to the spacious primary bedroom, where she had placed one of the bouquets in a vase. Alan had told her that Brad would be in his study and warned her that disturbing him would be unwise. She stretched out on the bed, dressed in an oversized blue t-shirt that had a skull printed on it, and a pair of knee-length shorts. She had her red blindfold in her hands. Her long black hair was tied in a bun, and her skin was glowing. Feeling nervous and uncomfortable, she quietly stared at the ceiling. Along with Haley herself, the roses and the blindfold provided the only color in the dark bedroom.
What makes you think you can seduce me dressed like that?
A voice called to her. Haley sat up when she heard Brad, her heart pounding. He stood in the doorway, looking like royalty despite his mask and black pajamas. Seduce? Haley didn't understand. Why would I seduce him? He can do whatever he wants with me. Or is he not attracted to me? She wondered. Brad took a few long strides toward her, but stopped halfway across the room. The red roses caught his attention for a moment, and then he looked back at Haley, who was sitting upright on the bed. He casually sat down beside her, unaware of her torment. She was incredibly nervous, but managed to appear calm.
Did Tyler tell you about me?
Tyler?
Mr. Clark.
Haley shook her head as she stared nervously at the man beside her. Brad turned to face her.
There's a small problem.
Episode 7. Are you sure? Haley's heart beat even faster. It was only her first night with her mysterious husband, and there was already a problem. She turned her worried face toward him. A problem?
Yes. It's about me,
he answered. Haley felt relieved. At least I'm not the problem. But what's he talking about? She wondered. She exhaled, and her anxiety subsided. Her heartbeat slowed to a more normal rate.
Haley, do you fully understand your job as my wife?
Being referred to as his wife flustered her. Yes, sir, of course. Haley cringed when she realized how she had addressed him. Brad didn't seem bothered at all, though.
Good.
Then what's the problem? She asked cautiously.
Women don't arouse me.
A moment of deafening silence followed his statement. Haley blinked and then her eyes widened. What? Wait, you're gay? His masked face, which had seemed calm just a moment ago, blazed like an ice-cold fire at her words. His anger chilled the room. She instinctively inched away from him, pulling the blanket around her. She felt like she had awakened a sleeping monster that was about to lash out at her. Even though she couldn't see his face, the change in his demeanor gave her goosebumps. After a few uncomfortable moments, she realized that if she had awakened a monster, it wasn't doing anything. She peeked out from under the blanket like a scared cat, hoping to read Brad's expression under the mask. His anger seemed to be dissipating, but her nervous sweat persisted. No. His voice, as cold as ice, made her shiver. His reply was as firm and as absolute as always. Are you sure? Once again, Haley cringed at her own words. She wanted to tape her mouth shut. She was still scared, and she worried that blurting things out would just make her situation worse. To her surprise, Brad still seemed unbothered.
I'm sure. Men are out of the question.
Then why?
I have no interest in women.
There was no doubt or hesitation in his answer. He sounded certain of himself. Still, Haley's curiosity was stronger than her fear, so she kept talking. Really? What about men? I mean romantically. You're not interested at all? Haley's curiosity quickly succumbed to fear when Brad didn't immediately reply. Brad was impressed. Haley was the first woman who had dared to talk to him this way, even though she had just met him a few hours earlier. He could tell how stubborn and curious she was by the way she kept talking despite her obvious fear. Even more surprising to him was how such a fragile creature was getting him to answer her ridiculous questions.
I have no interest in men either.
His voice was firm again, indicating that he had grown tired of the topic. But his reply lessened Haley's fear, so she kept going. So basically, you're not interested in either men or women.
Correct.
Haley slowly covered her mouth in surprise. Is he seriously not interested in anyone? He has no interest in humans? Is he really a monster? Or maybe he's interested in witches or fairies, she thought. Her ideas were getting ridiculous, and she knew that he was a man of few words. But since he was still responding, she kept asking questions. Then why did you marry me?
I need a child.
His response hit her like a bolt of lightning. She knew what she had agreed to, and she wouldn't go back on their agreement. Still, she couldn't imagine herself bearing a child and becoming a mother. She was physically capable, but she just didn't think she was ready for it. But how can that happen if you... She began.
That's why you need to seduce me.
Episode 8. A Soft Glance.
That's why you need to seduce me. Seduce me.
Haley repeated Brad's words to herself. They echoed in her mind, numbing it and leaving her speechless. She had already accepted that she would give herself to him, but she had not expected that she would have to be the one to make the first move. Haley felt scared and bewildered. She had agreed to an affectionless marriage with a complete stranger. She had just enough resolve to go to bed with him. There was none left for the new challenge he had presented her with. She had no experience with relationships as she had never been in one before, and had no idea how they worked. A stream of questions flowed through her mind. What if I fail? What if I can't seduce him? What if he hurts Owen? She wondered. Haley considered herself strong and confident, and she was sure that she could do almost anything he asked of her. But she had no idea how to do what he had just asked. Climbing Mount Everest seemed like an easier task than seducing a man who had just told her that he had never been aroused by anyone. How can I make someone who's not interested in humans want me? She thought. The only way for her to ease some of her worries was to keep talking. She turned to Brad again. If you need someone to seduce you, why didn't you find someone more experienced? She asked. Tyler had asked her if she was single that day in the middle of the road, but he hadn't asked if she had any experience. Wouldn't that have been something they would have been looking for?
I already tried that. Experience has nothing to do with it.
Haley bit her lip. If experienced women couldn't do it, then how can I? She wondered. Why don't you just... I heard there were drugs. or that thing called IVF? Before she could finish her sentence, Haley once again found herself grabbing the blanket and throwing it over herself as quickly as she could. Her words had touched a nerve, and Brad's anger flared through his mask. His icy cold glare made the room feel 10 times colder than it had felt just a few minutes earlier. Haley shuddered in fear, expecting the return of the monster that she had awakened. She sensed that Brad could be truly dangerous. She had never been as scared of anyone as she was of him at that moment. Meanwhile, Brad noticed that even though the woman sitting beside him was trembling in fear again, she forced herself to keep talking. "Sorry," she said. Her voice was soft and hoarse, but Brad found it calming.
"Do you really want me to put you through that?" he asked.
The cold simplicity of the question made Haley consider the idea more carefully. She shuddered just thinking about what that kind of procedure would entail. She felt relieved that Brad, despite his volatile temper and mysteriousness, sounded like he hadn't even considered asking her to do it. "I'm so sorry. Forget I said it. I'll try my best to seduce you."
"Good. And don't ever mention IVF again."
Haley could sense his disapproval and hatred of in vitro fertilization. The words themselves seemed taboo. While she didn't want to go through the tests, hormone injections, and examinations, she didn't understand why he would feel so strongly against it. She imagined that his reasons were complex. "Could I have some time to prepare? Maybe a day?" Haley didn't finish her sentence. She was already lost in her thoughts. She wasn't the kind of woman who would go into battle unarmed, and she needed time to research the art of seduction.
"I'm going abroad tomorrow. You can take all the time you need. Let me warn you, though, not to even think about breaking the rules while I'm gone."
Brad glared at her through his mask. His words suggested that he already knew what she wanted to do. He took the blindfold from her hand and carefully wrapped it around her eyes. She tensed up, but did not resist. Brad stared at his blindfolded wife. He had no words to describe her.
"Get some sleep," he said as he removed his black mask.
Haley couldn't see him as he untied it, but she heard it land on the table beside him. "Good night," she said, but he didn't reply. He just lay down quietly, so Haley did the same. Brad woke up after midnight. His wife's normally soft arm was wrapped around his neck in a stranglehold. Her slow, deep breathing told him that she was fast asleep. He removed her arm and sat up. He turned on the light and looked at her. She was sprawled gracelessly across the bed, her limbs reaching all 4 corners as though she wanted to claim it as her own personal territory. The blindfold was useless. It had slipped off her eyes and fallen to her neck. Brad hadn't expected such a fragile woman to be so wild in her sleep. He hadn't been able to sleep with all her tossing and turning. His eyes sparkled mysteriously as he thought about what a strange creature she was. Even while she was fast asleep without a care in the world, she had still managed to cause trouble by kicking him out of his own bed. His gaze softened. He wasn't angry. His tolerance of her strange behavior surprised him. He had never felt such tolerance before. Episode 9. A Table for One. Brad was up at dawn. He sat alone in a dark, quiet room, holding his mask as he observed the moon through a large window. He had the rigid posture of a prince.
"So, how was your first night with her?" The voice behind him broke the silence. "Disastrous."
"Ha ha," the man laughed. Brad's one-word description of his first night with his wife amused him. As he approached, the moonlight revealed his face. Brad saw his bodyguard, the one Haley knew as Mr. Clark. The moment Brad saw his face, his gaze turned deadly.
Yeah, I'm taking it off now."
The man ran his fingers along his neck. After a few seconds, he peeled something off his face. With his mask removed, the man who looked like a soldier now had a breathtakingly handsome face that was as pale as snow. Anyone who saw his complexion and features might mistake him for a vampire prince.
"This mask is so convincing that she actually called me Mr. Clark," he sighed,
while looking at the mask in his hand.
"So, how is she? Did you talk to her?" "She's strange. She asked if I was gay."
"Seriously? She said that?"
"Wait, you didn't hurt her because of that, did you?"
"Strangely enough, I couldn't stay angry at her." Brad's answer rendered his companion speechless, but in a good way. He looked pleased and proud of himself.
Tyler, why did you choose her?
Well,
Because of her looks, of course. I figured you would like her.
Tyler's answer was an obvious lie. Brad could tell that his friend didn't want to tell him the truth. He knew that Tyler would never hide anything from him without a serious reason.
If you lie to me the next time I ask you that, you'll pay.
Brad's voice was icy cold and heartless, but Tyler still smiled mischievously as if he had expected that response.
Yeah, I'll tell you when the time is right.
Brad was already gone when Haley woke up. The young men she had met the previous day, Alan and Leo, were also gone, along with the bodyguards she knew as Mr. Clark. All traces of them had vanished. Haley was mystified. She couldn't believe that she had slept so soundly and comfortably in the same bed as her cold and mysterious husband. She had expected to start the day feeling sleep-deprived, since she had always had trouble sleeping in unfamiliar places, much less sharing a bed with a strange man she had just met. But the opposite had happened. Was I really that exhausted? She wondered. Everything about Brad intrigued her, but she tried not to show her curiosity.
Ma'am, your husband left this for you.
Mr. Green seemed to be the only person left in the huge gray mansion. Haley stared at the sleek black card in his hand. She slowly took it with her brows knitted. What is it? She asked.
You can use it for your personal expenses, ma'am. You can buy anything you want with it.
The old man's face was bright as he smiled pleasantly at her. Thank you, but where is he? I mean, where's Brad?
I'm sorry, but he left hours ago.
Haley pursed her lips upon hearing of Brad's departure. When will he come back?
I'm afraid I can't say. I don't know where he went or when he'll return.
Mr. Green's apologetic tone made Haley feel awkward. Outwardly, though, she showed no signs of discomfort. Okay, no problem, she said lightly. The butler was visibly relieved. He led her to a large dining table covered with delicacies suitable for a princess. She stared in shock as she sat alone at the table. Mr. Green and a maid stood in a corner motionless. Haley invited them to eat breakfast with her, but her attempts were futile. Saddened, she ate by herself, feeling like she was alone in the world. Episode 10, Gaze and Smile. Later that day, she left the mansion, carrying a notebook and an overnight bag with her. Mr. Green, concerned for her well-being, wouldn't let her leave on her own, so despite her protests, she was escorted to the hospital. She spent the afternoon with Owen, who was still recovering, and then went to the home of her best friend from high school. Amy was a die-hard fan of romance novels, romantic movies, and anything else related to romance. She hoped to become a successful romance author. Since Haley had not had much dating experience in high school, she figured Amy was the best person to turn to for help. She desperately needed advice to help her seduce Brad. She wrote notes in her notebook as she and Amy talked. The next few days went by in a flash, but Brad didn't return. Haley's notebook was full of notes from the 3 nights she had spent at Amy's house. Unfortunately, Amy had travel plans and had to leave. Haley, whose only other companion was in the hospital, decided to spend her time reading and researching anything she could find about the art of flirtation and seduction. A week later, the mansion was in chaos. Mr. Green couldn't control its newest resident, who he thought of as a wild princess. He had told Haley that Brad's trips abroad usually lasted a long time. The shortest trip that Brad had taken had lasted a month. Haley had been shocked, but also pleased. She would have plenty of time to prepare for the challenge that awaited her when he returned. In addition to her main task of learning about seduction, she had other plans. She had approached Mr. Green and insisted on making some changes to the mansion's garden. She had mentioned adding more color to break up the monotony. She wanted to turn the dark, chilly grounds into something more romantic that would be a perfect setting for future dates. Although Mr. Green and the maids liked her idea, they were shocked that she wanted to do it herself. But they couldn't change her mind. Their new boss was so stubborn that they had to go along with her plan. Haley stepped outside under a bright, sunny sky. It had been 7 days since her return from Amy's house, and she felt that it was time to get started in the garden. She dug several holes and was just about to plant a flower in one of them when the sky suddenly darkened. She looked up and was shocked to see that Brad had appeared. Everyone tensed up. Brad's staff was worried that they had been caught red-handed making Haley work while they stayed clean and tidy. She looked like a dethroned princess who had turned into a messy but beautiful gardener. Haley stood quietly, waiting for Brad to scold her like a drill sergeant might scold a soldier. She was wearing another oversized printed t-shirt paired with black jogging pants, both of which were covered in dirt. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and her face and neck were wet with sweat, indicating to Brad that she had been working under the sun for quite some time. However, Brad didn't say a word. His gaze skimmed past the garden and his staff and rested on the quiet woman standing before him. He noticed that her hands were as dirty as her clothes. I'm just planting some things in the garden, she said, smiling pleasantly at him. Welcome back. Haley stared at the masked man in front of her, and without even thinking about how she looked, she jumped into what she called her mission mode. She remembered the first thing she had written in her notebook. Step 1 in the art of seduction was to gaze and smile. Amy had told her that a gaze could be so powerful that it could melt even the thickest wall between a woman and her target. She had also said that a dazzling smile was effortlessly sexy and could melt even the coldest heart. Therefore, Haley put all her energy into maintaining eye contact with Brad as she flashed the most charming smile that she could muster. She summoned what Amy had said was her flirtatious nature. But something was wrong. Brad's mask was in the way. It was a distracting obstruction that hid his reaction. She needed to follow her plan at all costs, so she kept gazing and smiling. Who knows? Maybe it's working, she thought. Brad, who had been observing Haley's expressions, noticed her warm smile and the intense energy in her eyes. He was momentarily baffled. He could tell that she was up to something, and that realization pleased him. Episode 11, The Art of Conversation. Haley's plan A was to go back to the very beginning and start with the basics. She had chosen this path simply because she needed to test the water and tread carefully. Brad was a completely unknown entity, and he was as cold as ice. She needed to execute her plan with care to have any chance of softening that glacial exterior. Otherwise, she might fall flat on her face before she even had an opportunity to get her plan off the ground. She needed to proceed cautiously and get his attention first. She understood she would have to court him, charm him, and seduce him, all to persuade him to desire her. She gave some thought to the women that had gone before her and failed. She had no doubt that they had tried their absolute best, but to no avail. Her decision to go back to the beginning was her attempt to try everything to achieve her goal and leave no stone unturned. She decided to call Plan A Courtship After Marriage. Haley and Brad were eating quietly together in the large dining room. Haley was actually silently brainstorming, trying to figure out what her next move would be. Although just the second step in her plan, she felt it was so much more difficult. Well, actually, she thought, it's not such a difficult step in normal circumstances, but with Brad, everything seems 10 times harder. The second step was to initiate conversation. Amy had emphasized, and Haley understood, but striking up a meaningful dialogue with Brad was easier said than done. She needed to create an opening that encouraged him to open up to her and make a connection, while remaining on high alert for any conversational landmines that might explode in her face, sending her straight back to square one. She had done her research. The problem was that the usual opening lines and questions all revolved around flirty subjects. She had read many examples of conversation starters in magazines, but none of them had seemed appropriate. How would she ask him what he liked best about her when he didn't know her? Or worse, ask him what his ideal type of woman or biggest turn-on was when he had made it clear that he wasn't interested in women, or men for that matter. And any questions about sex would be non-starters. How could she question him about preferences when he had made it clear he didn't know? Indeed, he had already made it clear that it was her mission to find out what he liked. What should have been a relatively simple step in ordinary circumstances was a headache for her, because these were anything but ordinary circumstances. Asking the man sitting across the table from her any question was taxing, requiring her to summon up huge amounts of both energy and courage. But Haley was nothing if not determined. This was her next step, so she would simply start where she had decided to start, at the beginning. Can I ask you something? She began tentatively. Speak, he replied, without bothering to look up. What's your favorite food? She asked. I don't have a favorite, he replied. Oh, how about movies? Do you have a favorite movie? She asked. I don't watch movies, he said simply. Oh, okay. What about sports? What's your favorite sport? She asked hopefully. I don't like any sport in particular, he replied. Do you have a favorite celebrity? She tried again. Nope, he said. Haley was speechless. This wasn't a conversation, it was an interrogation. She had asked the questions and he had answered them. However, she had achieved nothing. She pressed her lips tightly together. This was proving to be even more difficult than she had imagined. But she plowed on. She had to keep trying. Is there nothing you're even remotely interested in? She asked. Brad suddenly stopped moving. He finally raised his head to look at her. She held her breath as she waited for his response. What do you think? He asked. Why is he asking me? Why is he turning the question around to me? How the hell should I know? She thought in confusion and frustration. Well, he sure knows how to dodge a question, this monster. Well, I think, soon enough, you'll be interested in me, she said with a smile. Upon hearing this, he put down his knife and fork. What makes you think that? He asked. I have faith in myself, she replied. But what if you fail? I won't, she assured him. Really? How sure are you? He asked. For heaven's sake, how did he manage to turn the tables and question me? Haley sighed and then gazed at him, determined as ever. Because I'm stubborn and I won't give up. Whatever happens, I will make you my... She stopped abruptly. After a short pause, and once she had chosen her words carefully, she continued. I will make you want me. After her outburst, she stared at him with a hint of defiance. Brad stared back. Her eyes were full of fighting spirit and determination, and she spoke as if her life depended on it. He almost smiled, and a strange sensation fluttered in the pit of his stomach. Good. I'll look forward to it then, he said. Then he picked up his knife and fork, and they continued their meal in silence. Episode 12. Date night. Can I just confirm something with you first? Haley once again broke the long silence. She knew nothing about her husband. The only thing he had told her was his first name, and she didn't even know if it was his actual name or not. She didn't want to think too much about his identity at such an early stage of the game. At that moment, she had other priorities. She was thinking about the third step on her to-do list. She considered briefly that she might be trying to move too fast, but then dismissed the thought. In reality, she couldn't waste a single chance she got. A few days previously, the maids had informed her that her husband was rarely at home. It wasn't unheard of for him to disappear for as long as a year. This thought made her a little uneasy, and therefore she resolved to make the most of any opportunity that presented itself. This was one such opportunity. She silently considered the third step in her plan, which was to take him out. Once again, this was easier said than done. She believed this step would be rather risky, but she had to give it her best shot. Brad had made his lack of interest in anything crystal clear. He was a man almost devoid of all human desires. But she believed that if they could maybe spend some time together on neutral territory, it might be easier to create something meaningful. And she may finally be able to make some progress. She might be able to break through that iron exterior, allowing her next moves to develop naturally. Out with it, he said impatiently. Well, aside from not seeing your face, I can do whatever I want, right? What I mean is, well, can I ask you out? Or can I touch you? She fumbled over the words. She was still finding this incredibly difficult. She sometimes felt as if she were addressing a tyrant, worried about how he would react every time she opened her mouth. She was always on high alert, her nervous energy making it impossible to relax. She wanted to ask him how the hell he managed to exude such a cold, hard, almost frightening aura when he was just eating. Who could do that? Her aim was to soften him up a little and get him to relax. Right now, she thought that taking him out might be a way to get him to mellow out. Maybe she would also be able to relax and learn how to be comfortable in his presence and talk to him normally. Otherwise, her plan was never going to work.
It depends, he replied vaguely.
You mean, as long as you're not busy? She asked.
You could say that, he responded.
Then, can I ask you out on a date? She ventured. Brad once again raised his head and stared at her, only seeing the same fierce determination in her eyes he had seen before.
Where? He asked.
Oh, you don't have to worry. You can still wear your mask. I already have a plan, she assured him. Her demeanor suddenly switched from edgy to enthusiastic. He knew she must have had some sort of strategy and that she was wasting no time because he sensed her impatience, like she was chasing a deadline. This made him frown.
When? He asked.
Are you free tomorrow? She proposed. Although his impulse was to respond immediately, before answering, he slipped his hand into his pocket, took out his cell phone, and made a call.
Tyler, do I have anything important on tomorrow? He asked.
Why? Tyler countered.
Just answer me.
Brad's voice thundered down the phone, sending a chill down Haley's spine. Tyler, however, could picture Brad's face at that precise moment, and the thought made him smile mischievously.
Okay, well, there is the meeting with the sole heir of Joseph Martinez's company, Tyler said. You can deal with that. Rearrange it, Brad replied.
Huh? Hang on, wait a minute, Brad, Tyler protested. But Brad had hung up before he could finish. Then he looked at the woman sitting opposite him.
Yes, I'm free, he confirmed.
When she heard that, Haley felt inexplicably but genuinely delighted. She gave him her most dazzling smile. Meanwhile, after his short conversation with Brad, Tyler looked at his cell phone with both surprise and curiosity. Brad had been looking forward to tomorrow's meeting, and now Tyler wanted to know what or who could have possibly changed his mind. He had insisted that Tyler arrange this meeting with the stubborn but genius heir to the Martinez company because he wanted to get him on side. Had Brad found someone else that he wanted to get on side? Tyler found that thought incredibly hard to believe. Brad was standing near a large window in a dark and dimly lit room. He was looking down at the garden, quietly watching the slight figure of a woman gardening like an expert.
Brad, what happened? I know you wanted to attend that meeting. What changed your mind?
Tyler's loud voice abruptly echoed inside the room. He looked at him with undisguised curiosity.
She asked me out,
said Brad simply.
Whoa, what? Seriously?
Tyler asked in surprise. He was wide-eyed with shock, not only because Haley had asked him out, but because he had changed his plans for the first time in his life for a woman. He simply couldn't believe it.
What the hell, he thought. Is someone actually going to thaw this man's heart? Has the long-awaited queen finally arrived? Is the Ice Age coming to an end?
Episode 13, Magical Mystery Tour.
Really? Where are you going? Asked Tyler.
I don't know, Brad replied, and he shrugged his shoulders.
What?
Oh no, Brad, Tyler said, exasperated. He had one hand on his forehead and the other on his hip. He shook his head in disbelief. He couldn't believe that this man had agreed to go out without even knowing where. Are you deliberately trying to make things hard for me? What if she wants to bring you somewhere crowded like Chelsea Market? Do you expect me to be able to secure such a place for you on such short notice? Tyler's voice was full of anxiety. Brad just looked at him blankly.
Do you honestly think she'll take me to a market?
He asked. How should I know? Why haven't you asked her where you'll be going? Tyler asked.
I did, of course, but she won't tell me. She just said she had a plan,
Brad explained. Tyler was speechless, but managed a short laugh. He was mystified. He had known Brad since they were kids, and he knew better than anyone that Brad was not a fan of recklessness and uncertainty.
Well, she is a dark horse, he thought. How has she persuaded him to go out without even telling him where? I'll go ask her. If the place is dangerous, then...
Tyler began.
Dangerous? What do you mean? Aren't we the dangerous ones? Brad interrupted.
You're being way too relaxed. Besides, weren't you the one who said we should keep a low profile for the time being? Tyler reminded him.
Do you think anyone will expect to see me out and about? Besides, aren't you going to be there?
Brad asked. Brad stared at him with his familiar, blank, yet unyielding gaze. Tyler subconsciously ran his fingers through his brown hair. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh as he was forced to surrender. He stared at his friend, knowing that he wouldn't be able to change his mind. I've got this, Tyler said as he started moving toward the door. He was still worried, but an idea began to form in his mind. As he reached the door, the concerned look was gone and was replaced by a wicked smile. This was one of Tyler's many talents. He was able to switch from a neurotic, nervous wreck to a mischievous, devilish rogue in an instant.
"I'll go ask her for the details," he said before shutting the door. "Miss Haley, Mr. Clark's here,"
Mr. Green whispered in Haley's ear. She was completely engrossed by a beautiful maple tree, and he hadn't wanted to startle her. As soon as she heard him, she stood up right away and asked, "Where is he?"
"In the lounge, sitting on the couch," he replied.
"Thank you," she said before turning and running toward the mansion as fast as she could. Mr. Green watched her go. She reminded him of a small child excited to see her parents, who had just arrived home from a long vacation. A few moments later, Haley found Tyler in the lounge. He had stayed with her for 5 days after she had signed the contract. He had taken care of everything at the hospital, and by the end of the 5 days, she had started to feel more comfortable with him. For this reason, of all the people around her at the moment, Tyler seemed to be the easiest for her to approach. "Mr. Clark, can we talk?" she asked. Tyler was surprised. He hadn't expected that Haley would want to speak to him as well.
Of course. I also have something I want to talk to you about, but go ahead," he said.
Haley seemed glad when Tyler agreed to speak to her right away, but she kept glancing nervously toward the stairs. She wasn't entirely sure whether she should talk to Tyler about her plans in this room.
"What is it?"
Tyler asked, even though he knew the reason she was wary was that she was worried she might be overheard. "Come on, let's go talk in the garden," she suggested with an awkward but pleasant smile. He agreed without question. He quietly followed her outside, and as they walked, he looked around and was a little surprised at the small changes she had made in the previously dull garden.
"You did all this?"
he asked while his eyes took in the small, colorful trees that had been arranged beautifully. "Not all by myself. The maids helped me," she admitted. He nodded approvingly. "So, Mr. Clark, I was planning to take Brad out on a date tomorrow," she said.
"Where to?" he asked.
She stepped a little closer to him and whispered something in his ear. When he heard her plan, he was thunderstruck for a fleeting moment and didn't know how to react. But like the professional he was, he quickly recovered, nodded his head, and told her that he understood what she wanted to happen.
"So, what's the plan? I'm sorry to have to ask, but I need to know for security purposes." "Don't worry, I won't tell him anything," he assured her.
Hearing that Tyler seemed supportive of her plan reassured Haley. Her relief was clear from the broad smile that lit up her beautiful face. Episode 14. An Ordinary Couple. Haley woke up in the middle of the night. She was half asleep as she climbed out of bed and made her way to the bathroom. A few moments later, she walked back into the bedroom. The light was on, and as soon as she saw Brad sleeping in her bed, curiosity suddenly overcame her. She slowly walked over and quietly climbed onto the bed beside him. She sat carefully, with her lips pressed together as tightly as possible. She desperately wanted to look at his face, and her heart was beating wildly at the thought. She just wanted to take a quick and harmless peek. It was as if, at this very moment, the temptation was greater than life itself. My God, is this how Eve felt when she ate the forbidden fruit? She wondered. She could only shake her head softly. I could just tell him that I saw him by accident, she reasoned. Then she took a quiet, deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to count. 1, 2, 3. She slowly turned her head, but her eyes remained closed. She sat there for a long time, facing the sleeping figure next to her with her eyes squeezed shut. Her heart was beating wildly, and she felt as if she was part of a thrilling scene from a suspense movie. Then, very, very slowly, she began to open her eyes while holding on tightly to the pillow in her arms. She held her breath without realizing it. She didn't dare make a single sound. Then she blinked several times, let her shoulders sag, and felt all the energy drain from her body. She hugged her pillow closer to her as if it would provide some comfort. Then she stared over at Brad again. His upper face was covered with a black sleeping mask. This mask was a little bigger than the one he usually wore, hiding his forehead and only showing his lips and the tip of his nose. So this is what he meant when he said accidents wouldn't happen, she thought. Haley felt exhausted. She lay down again, facing the man beside her. She could see his neck, Adam's apple, perfect jawline. those beautiful lips, and his jet black hair. Although it was only their second night together, she didn't feel she was in any danger. He was just lying there next to her, motionless, and she couldn't take her eyes off of him.
"Can't sleep?"
he asked, startling her. She hadn't expected that he would wake up. Oh God, how long has he been awake? Does he know I've been staring at him all this time? She thought. No, I'm turning off the light now. Good night, she said hastily. She was in a state of panic. She felt as if she had been caught red-handed with her fingers in the cash register. Her heart was beating so loudly in her ears that she was sure Brad would be able to hear it too. The weather was bright, and Brad and Haley were seated inside a black sedan, both dressed in plain black t-shirts and tattered jeans. A few hours earlier, Haley had been unsure and nervous when she had asked Brad to wear the simple clothing she had bought for him. However, he was surprisingly cooperative and took the clothes without a word, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Shortly after that, she was equally stunned when she saw him dressed in the ordinary clothes, because he had still managed to look elegant and handsome. His long legs were hugged tightly by the jeans, revealing their strong, muscular shape. She had looked at him with undisguised admiration and approval. "To make you not look weird, I bought these," she said once she had pulled herself together. She smiled brightly and showed him a couple of masks. She took the smaller one and wrapped it around her face. Brad looked at her. The masks were all right, but a little strange. They were childishly designed masks with bunny ears towering above the eyes. He stared at her for a moment, and seeing the strange mask on her face made him take the one she was holding out to him. Haley encouraged him with her dazzling smile. "We're here, sir," the driver said as the car stopped. Brad looked outside the car's window, and then his brows slowly knitted together in a frown. Meanwhile, Tyler patiently waited on a nearby park bench with a coffee. He stood up the moment he saw the doors to the black car open. Haley climbed out first. She was wearing a loose black t-shirt and black jeans, and the cutest bunny mask. Tyler smiled. She looked adorable, and he could see other people around them turning their heads to admire her appreciatively. What Tyler saw next almost made him choke on his coffee. Holy Mother of God! Tyler couldn't believe his eyes. He watched as Brad climbed out of the car wearing the same casual clothes Haley wore and a mask identical to hers. He was stunned. He never thought the day would ever come that he would witness Brad wearing something funny or whimsical, such as a bunny mask. "I have to hand it to you, Haley," Tyler whispered to himself. "You have succeeded so far where all others have failed." He was full of admiration for this woman. He watched as they walked past him, looking like a couple of lovebirds. Episode 15. Welcome to the Haunted House. Haley had brought Brad to Coney Island. When he realized they were at an amusement park, Brad's eyes slowly narrowed behind his mask. He kept his reservations to himself and waited for his wife's next move. Meanwhile, Haley was telling herself to focus on her mission. But being here reminded her of her brother. It had been such a long time since they had last visited an amusement park together. She felt nostalgic as she looked around at the colorful and brightly lit rides. After a few moments lost down memory lane, she took a deep breath and concentrated on the mission ahead. She turned to the man beside her and smiled brightly. The fourth step in her plan was to make physical contact. She needed to touch him, and she remembered what Amy had told her. "I mustn't make it too obvious. It must feel natural," she reminded herself. Haley knew that she needed to try different strategies to discover what would make her husband react. She had to experiment and observe his every reaction. And to do that, she had to be both alert and mindful. "Do you have any place in particular you want to visit first?" she asked, even though she already knew what he would say. "It's up to you," he replied, predictably. "Okay, let's go," she said. She casually grabbed him by the wrist and pulled him in the direction of the boardwalk. But something unexpected happened. The moment she touched him, she felt a spark and a fluttering in the pit of her stomach. This reaction to Brad's touch threw her off balance. "Why the hell am I feeling like this? I'm just holding his wrist, for heaven's sake," she thought. Haley couldn't believe it. She was so bewildered by her own response to their physical contact that she couldn't even look at Brad. And as she was desperately trying to calm herself, she didn't notice where she was leading him. The route they were taking hadn't been part of her plan. Meanwhile, as Brad walked alongside her, his brows began to furrow into a frown to match his narrowed eyes. The woman that had been happily chatting to him not 2 minutes before was now walking at full speed, dragging him along without a word. Thankfully, the crowd simply parted to allow them to pass through. Maybe people thought they were a celebrity couple in disguise. While Brad was following his wife agreeably, he occasionally glanced at the wrist she was holding. He could feel the strength in her firm grip, as if she were ensuring they wouldn't be separated. He felt like a kid being dragged along by his mother. In the middle of their high-speed walk, a woman in uniform stopped them unexpectedly. Haley snapped back to reality as if suddenly awakened from a dream. "Welcome to the haunted house. We're giving a 50% discount to the 10th couple who joins us, and that just happens to be you two. Please enjoy your discount, ma'am and sir, and good luck," the woman announced brightly and quickly. And before Haley knew it, Brad had accepted the tickets the attendant had held out to him. She was surprised that he had taken the tickets, but she was also surprised to see where they had ended up. "Wait, what? How did we end up here? Weren't we heading to the boardwalk just now? Where are we? The haunted house?" Haley asked all these questions without pausing for breath. Brad simply said, "Come on, let's go." She only had a moment to consider the situation. She supposed it was a step in the right direction because it appeared that something had finally caught his attention. But why? Is Brad interested in horror? My God, he is a monster. I can't go in, she thought in terror. Haley's greatest weakness was her brother. A very close second was her fear of ghosts. She hated horror movies, and ghost stories terrified her. There was no way she could step foot inside a haunted house. "You want to go inside?" she asked hesitantly. Brad nodded, and she realized she had no choice but to go inside. She took a deep breath and convinced herself that her mission was more important than her irrational fear of ghosts. The man she was with was a much more terrifying monster than any ghost she was ever likely to encounter. Meanwhile, Brad was curious. He thought that the haunted house was Haley's intended destination all along, and that was why she had dragged him here at full speed. He thought that she must have been chasing that 10th couple discount. If all that's true, why does she look so tense, almost fearful, like she doesn't want to go inside, he wondered. Episode 16, Trigger Point. They entered the haunted house and were plunged into darkness. As they felt their way around, Brad's uneasiness increased. As they moved deeper inside, they encountered all kinds of trickery and illusions, mimicking ghosts and ghouls and monsters, all intended to frighten the visitors. Even though this was his first time in a haunted house, Brad suspected the designer of this particular house was very skilled. The visual props were realistic, the lighting was perfect, and the sounds were truly terrifying. As they stumbled their way through narrow corridors, Brad noticed a change in the woman trailing in his wake. Before, she had been animated and excited, but now she was deathly silent. She hadn't made a sound since they had entered the house. He could feel her following closely behind, tugging his shirt tightly, and leaning her forehead against his back as though hiding. His usually expressionless face transformed into a frown behind his mask. As he tried to figure out what was going on, they reached a dark room lit only by a few small candles, and Brad stopped. He looked around. It was staged as though it were a room where rituals involving witches or black magic might take place. He turned to face the woman behind him, and his eyes widened when he saw how pale she was. Her mask hung loosely around her neck, her eyes were tightly closed, and her knuckles were white from gripping his shirt. From her forehead to her neck, she was covered in sweat. Brad wasn't sure what to think, but he decided to turn back. He gripped her shoulders lightly and said, "Look, let's go back." As he spoke, he felt her stiffen. Haley had been concentrating on thinking about other, more pleasant things in an attempt to take her mind off where she was. When Brad's voice cut through those thoughts, it startled her. Her grip on his shirt loosened, and she suddenly opened her eyes. However, the first thing she saw was a wooden coffin surrounded by candles. Her eyes widened in terror, and just as she was about to cover her face, the hand of a rotting corpse appeared. Haley screamed at the top of her lungs, instantly launched herself at Brad, and threw her arms around him. She shivered uncontrollably as her piercing screams echoed throughout the house. Brad was speechless. He realized now that she was scared half to death. She was holding onto him so tightly and shaking like a leaf. He raised his arm, reached around, and patted her gently on the back in an effort to calm and soothe her. "It's not real. It's all just tricks and special effects," he said, but she couldn't stop shaking, and neither did she loosen her grip on him. At that moment, Haley had been propelled back in time. She was imagining her 10-year-old self, terrified and sitting all alone in the corner of a dimly lit room, hugging her knees a month after she had discovered her mother's body in her room. She had been a child, still traumatized by these events and raw with grief, and she had been surrounded by greedy people trying to steal what had rightfully been hers. She remembered how she had felt, like a rabbit chased by wolves. The family mansion where she had once felt so safe and happy had been turned into a house of horrors. All around the house, she had found props meant to disgust and horrify her. At night, she had been kept awake by blood-curdling noises that terrified her. It was not until years later that she had discovered that it had all been part of a ruse to turn her out of her home and for these people to get their hands on her fortune. The mental scars and the emotional trauma had stayed with her, and any reminders, like an innocent haunted house at an amusement park, meant that she relived those experiences all over again. Episode 17. Zombies and Ghosts. Brad waited a while, but it soon became clear that Haley was petrified. She couldn't move. "We're leaving," he uttered, but she hadn't seemed to hear him. So he moved his head closer to her and then said the same words gently into her ear. He gently removed his arm from around her shoulder and carefully took her by the hand. He then started leading her toward the exit, while she quietly followed along behind slowly. Her knees were still trembling, and she gripped Brad's hand like a vice, as if she would never let go. However, what happened next was a disaster. A group of people dressed as zombies and ghosts suddenly appeared behind them. This was all part of the haunted house experience. They descended on the couple, daubing them with red paint and grabbing at their arms and legs. Haley felt she was being dragged from Brad. The staff were all professional and played their parts incredibly well. However, Haley went crazy. If she was hysterical before, she was now uncontrollable. She grabbed Brad's shirt with all her strength, and it ripped. She screamed and shrieked and tried to escape. She kicked and scratched, but it was all to no avail. Like the true professionals they were, the zombies and ghosts continued their attack. But Brad knew that she was in genuine distress, and rage welled up inside him. He knew, of course, that the zombies and ghosts were only doing their job, but he didn't understand why they couldn't recognize genuine fear and anguish when they saw it. Suddenly, at the top of his voice, he bellowed at them. "Stop! All of you! Let her go!" His angry shouts echoed throughout the house, and everyone stopped where they stood. They let go of Haley immediately and took a couple of steps backward. Brad then moved closer to Haley, who looked like she was on the verge of breaking down entirely. He saw how miserable and utterly exhausted she was, and the next thing he knew, he had taken her in his arms and was holding her as tightly as he could. Tyler was watching the exit of the haunted house and could not believe his eyes when he saw Brad and Haley emerge. He was carrying her in his arms like a scene from a romantic movie. Tyler was just trying to work out what was going on when he saw more clearly that all was not as well as it seemed. As the couple got closer, he saw their disheveled appearance. They were not the same cute and stylish couple who had entered the house minutes earlier. They genuinely looked like they had just survived the zombie apocalypse, which, in effect, they had. Brad's shirt was ripped, Haley's shoes were in his hand, and their clothes were smeared with red paint. Brad's bunny mask was torn, and the ears were no longer straight, looking as if they had been punched. They looked miserable, yet cool at the same time. "This would make a perfect picture from a movie," thought Tyler. However, he knew he couldn't just stand around watching them. From the look on Brad's face, he could see there was a problem. He ran over to them. "What happened?" he asked, even though he already knew they had probably been mobbed by zombies and ghosts. "Get the car. We're leaving," Brad said. Brad's cold and harsh voice made Tyler react right away. He was desperate to know what had happened to make Brad so angry, but he knew he would have to wait until later. "Was it something Haley did? Was it something the staff did? He's always been cold and unfeeling. But what has happened to get this much of a reaction from him? What was such a big deal?" Tyler was genuinely puzzled. Episode 18. The morning after. Haley was groggy and disoriented when she woke up. Then she realized it was the next morning and she was back at Gray Mansion. As the memories from their first date the previous day came flooding back, she bit her lip and her brain started spinning. "My God, what have I done?" she thought. She sat up in bed with her head in her hands, tugging her hair. All she could think was, My life is over.
Does your head hurt?
At the sound of Brad's voice interrupting her thoughts, her first feeling was fear. She grabbed a blanket and covered herself. No, I'm fine, she replied, her voice hoarse. His eyes, behind his mask, narrowed when he saw her reaction. He moved toward her and sat down on the bed facing her.
You fainted yesterday, he said gently. The doctor said you might be phasmophobic. Is that true?
She was still tense, but Brad's words were kind and his voice gentle. She slowly pulled down the blanket and peeked at him from behind it, like a cat. After a few moments, she nodded.
Then why did you go inside the haunted house?
He asked. Because you wanted to, she replied.
Who said I wanted to? He asked.
Huh, but you were the one who chose. Her voice trailed off. Thinking back, she realized it hadn't been his choice. It was her who had dragged him there in the first place. Wait, was it all just a misunderstanding? She thought. Haley couldn't believe what had happened. She bit her lip again. As Brad watched her, he realized she had misunderstood him. Sorry, she said as she stared at him, fidgeting like a bird.
For what? He asked.
Because our first date was an unmitigated disaster, she replied.
It wasn't your fault,
he said firmly. Then he lifted his long and elegant arm, placed his hand on her head, and gently caressed her hair. She was stunned by this gesture and rendered speechless. The moment seemed to last forever. She had been uptight and nervous until then, but her nerves unraveled when she felt his touch, and she relaxed. What's going on here? She thought. Brad left the room, and when he spotted Tyler, his gentle aura instantly turned cold again.
What happened to those people who abused her?
He demanded. He had, of course, had Haley's background investigated before he went through with the marriage. So he had some indication of the things she had been through as a child, and why she might have been so traumatized in the haunted house the previous day.
Well, they're still living in the family mansion,
Tyler replied.
Destroy them, he ordered.
His words left no room for discussion, and, as usual, Tyler was given no opportunity to speak his mind. However, Tyler agreed with Brad on this occasion, and he responded with a smile.
Already done,
he said.
Good,
Brad replied.
But what about the house? I understand she never wants to go back,
he said while scrutinizing Brad's expression. Brad just replied with a short,
get rid of it.
He displayed no emotion at all, and Tyler was left feeling disappointed. But he was stubborn. He was intrigued by Brad's mood, and determined to get to the bottom of it.
Anyway, Brad, you've been mad since yesterday, Tyler began. What's wrong? Is it because the first date with your wife was an outright disaster? Is it because she ripped your shirt and made you look a mess for the first time in your life? Is it because your cute bunny mask suffered the same fate as you? Is it—
Shut up, Brad interrupted angrily.
Yeah, I get it, Tyler laughed. But I think you're mad because of what happened to Haley, right? You're concerned about— Get out. Now, Brad yelled at him. Okay, I'm leaving. Why can't you be nice to me for once? Complained Tyler.
Episode 19. Way to a Man's Heart. Once Brad had left the room, Haley was left in a daze. Brad's kind gesture had been most unexpected. As she sat on her bed, she felt an overwhelming feeling of warmth. It was something she hadn't experienced before. Right after she closed the door behind him, she jumped off the bed to grab her notebook. She was filled with renewed purpose, and her eyes glittered with excitement. She thought she was finally making some progress. There had definitely been some new developments. He had at last given her a sign that not everything she was doing was futile. That simple gesture had boosted her confidence, and she felt newly motivated. While she scanned her notebook, all she could think about was moving forward with the next steps while the going was good. However, to her dismay, steps 5 through 8 were supposed to have been executed during and after their date. These were no longer appropriate as the chance had been lost. However, step number 9 seemed to be a great choice. Step 9 advised making a homemade meal or snack. In other words, she needed to cook for him. She remembered Amy's wise words. Giving a man handmade gifts or homemade food will instantly make him feel special, and that is a huge leap forward, she recalled. It was also well known that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. She believed this was surely an effective strategy in any plan to make a man fall for a woman. And Haley agreed with this sentiment. Food was one of the greatest temptations that hardly anyone could resist. Filled with renewed enthusiasm, she punched the air as if to rally the troops, and the voice in her head said with determination, "Okay, let's do this." Tyler was watching Haley as she asked him for information about Brad. He watched this charming and spirited woman in front of him as he responded to her eager questions.
What does she really think of me, though?
He thought sullenly.
Am I not the scary, macho bodyguard any longer? She's asking me questions as if I were Brad's mother.
"But you must know," she pleaded, looking like a small child asking her dad to buy her some candy. "Please."
So now I'm a father?
Tyler thought, trying not to giggle.
Miss Haley, why don't you just go ask him yourself?
He finally replied. "I did, but he said he doesn't have a favorite," she grumbled.
Oh, I see.
Tyler should have expected that. In his head, he facepalmed himself. He knew Brad was the type who ate to live. He didn't really enjoy his food. There was no food he craved. For Brad, food was nourishment, not pleasure.
Miss Haley, why don't you just cook your favorite food instead? Your husband isn't a fussy eater. He's not very particular about what he eats. He just doesn't have a favorite dish. I'm sure he'll like whatever you serve him," Tyler suggested.
"Is that so?" Haley asked, unsure. She couldn't believe that Brad really didn't have a favorite food. She had hoped that maybe he was being difficult when he hadn't answered her before. She was quite shocked to know that he had been telling the truth. Although she knew Brad wasn't easily pleased to begin with, she was still surprised that this ancient route of seduction was completely closed off to her. Even this pathway to the heart would appear to be powerless against him. "This is tough. Is there really nothing that this man likes?" she thought. Meanwhile, Tyler, standing right across from her, looked amused as he watched her ever-changing expressions. It seemed the news he had delivered had knocked her plans sideways. And yet, she seemed determined as ever. Her eyes still burned with fire, and she told Tyler that she would still try, no matter what the result. "What have I got to lose?" she asked him, smiling brightly, full of the courage of her own convictions.
This woman, Tyler thought with admiration. She doesn't give up easily. She remains motivated in the face of so much adversity.
He smiled mischievously while silently rooting for her. Episode 20, Off to the Market. "Okay then, Mr. Clark, I'll see you later," said Haley. Tyler jumped up in surprise.
"Wait, where are you going?" he asked.
"To the market," she replied.
"But why don't you just ask the maids to go instead?" he asked.
"No, it's fine. I want to go buy the ingredients myself," she said firmly. She sounded bright and breezy again, and it amazed him that she kept bouncing back. He knew she wasn't going to give up, but he didn't expect her to be so resilient after each setback. Despite appearances, she was a woman of hidden strength and resolve.
"Oh, okay, I'll go call Mr. Green to accompany," Tyler began.
"No need, I can go alone, don't worry. I'm used to going to the market by myself," she reassured him. Haley's firm tone, kind eyes, and warm smile were an almost hypnotic combination. She seemed to be able to make anyone agree to almost anything. Tyler was intrigued. He just nodded agreeably and asked no more questions. She then turned and started to walk away. When she heard steps coming from the stairs, she paused and looked behind her. As expected, Brad was standing there watching her. Tyler, who had been standing between them, immediately attempted to slink away to one side in order to have a better view of what was about to unfold. He was sure that something interesting was about to happen, but no one said a word. Tyler watched Brad standing there motionless. The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. The tension was unbearable, and Tyler felt he might burst with anticipation. Haley finally spoke. "I'm going to buy some things at the market," she said with her usual dazzling smile. However, the cold masked man just nodded at her. Tyler's mouth twitched. He was disappointed in Brad. There followed another long silence, and Haley shifted awkwardly. This had nothing to do with the deafening quiet in the room, but as a result of what was going through her mind. The truth was that it had suddenly occurred to her that this would be the ideal opportunity to execute step number 8. Step number 8 was to do simple, cheesy things. She recalled the kind gesture Brad had shown her earlier. When she looked at him now, not saying a word, she was reminded of the enormity of her task, and she went back into mission mode. She realized that this would be the perfect opportunity to do a simple, cheesy thing. Haley had already spent time on the internet and had read every article she could find about every cheesy idea that existed on the planet, But surprisingly, the general consensus had been that a simple kiss was the most simple but effective cheesy thing to do. She remembered what Amy had told her and played it over in her mind. A simple kiss on the cheek is cute, and it's a great way to keep the avenues of flirting open. Sometimes a simple but unexpected kiss can be even more effective than an intense one.
What is it?
Brad finally spoke as Haley stood still, deep in thought. His deep, cold voice startled her, and she tensed. "Oh, nothing," she said with a wave of her hand. "I'm going now. See you later." The moment Haley started to walk away, Tyler felt the urge to go and smack Brad as hard as he could. It's like he's made of wood. He's so unfeeling. I could scream at him sometimes, he thought. However, what happened next dissolved any disappointment he felt. When she got to the front door, Haley suddenly stopped in her tracks. She turned around and ran back toward Brad. The moment she reached him, she stood on her tiptoes, kissed him gently on the corner of his mouth, turned around and ran back. It all happened so quickly, and Haley had disappeared from the room before the two men had a chance to realize what had happened. Brad stood still as a statue in the large gray room, as Tyler's gaze scrutinized him for any reaction whatsoever.